And Dave Smith on the podcast. Dave Smith is talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And I have to say, I feel for Dave right now because Dave is Jewish. And as a black person who was standing against BLM, speaking against that, as a black person who is has very many conservative values, traditional values, and doesn't go along with the woke ideologies, I know how hard it could be to feel like you're speaking against your people, what kind of slack that you get when they call you a self-hating person and all sorts of things like that. And Dave is about to get the same thing because as he's speaking about the Israel and Palestine conflict as a Jewish man, he's actually speaking more in favor of Palestine and speaking more for sympathy towards the Palestinian people. And I know what kind of flack he's going to get for that. And he's doing it nonetheless, which got to commend him for that. He's going to say a lot of things right now. Listen up. A lot of information in this one. Let's go.
We automatically subscribe to whatever one side thinks. Like if you're on the right, you automatically subscribe to whatever the right-wing people think. If you're on the left, you automatically subscribe to whatever the left-wing people. Which wars are we supporting? And they're different sides are supporting different wars, which is very strange, right?
Yeah, it's bizarre. Like it's binary thinking that people just fall into, but war is the worst of it. War makes people so stupid. I mean, it's like the way they talk about these things. Like you said, it's like the side of pure good versus the side of pure bad. It's like a 7-year-old boy playing with action figures. Like this is good guy, this is bad guy. And reality is almost never anything like that. It's always enormously more complex than that. And I think that's the truth with the history of Israel and Palestine is that it's not, and I'm Jewish, so like I grew up very much just only hearing the Israeli side of the story. And it's basically, you can still get this in a Ben Shapiro video, that millions of people watch, but it really will. Their story is just kind of like, the Jews came here and we just said, hey, we want to be independent. And then in response to that, all the Arab nations attacked us. And then we just keep offering you peace. And they just keep saying no. And they just want, we just want to live in peace and they just want to kill Jews. And that's the story. And there's nothing else that you need to know that's relevant here. But that's just so not true. There's so much more to it than that. And if you're gonna tell this story and you want to zoom out and really understand what's going on here, it's just if you're going to ignore the fact that the creation of Israel involved kicking a whole lot of people out of where they were living at the time and had been living for hundreds of years, 750,000 Palestinian Arabs were kicked out of their land. Many of them were forced out. Many of them fled and then were never allowed to come back. And
this was in 47?
Well, it started in 1947. Let me just say, by the way, and I'll just do this quickly, but I just like a disclaimer, which I never did when we were talking about all the Ukraine stuff with, because the last few times I've been on the podcast, we talked about the war in Ukraine a lot, and I totally opposed America and American involvement, and I put a lot of blame on America and NATO for kind of provoking the war and continuing the war. And all types of people who disagree with me, they say, like, you're a Putin supporter, or you're spewing Russian propaganda. Right. But I never felt the need to kind of be like, no, by the way, I'm not a Putin agent or something, because it's just so stupid. There's like no Americans are sworn loyal to Vladimir Putin. There's zero people like that. But there are actually people who hate Jews. And so just to be clear, that's not my perspective at all.
I
love Jewish people. I love Israelis. I think there's lots of cool things about their society. And what I'm saying, if I say like, hey, the way you got your land was really fucked up and you kill a lot of innocent people, that's nothing I wouldn't say about my own government as well.
Right.
And I love America. So just as the first disclaimer there.
I know a guy who actually did move to Russia.
All right, fine. So there's one. But
Jeff Monson. He was an MMA fighter.
Oh, yeah. He fought Tim Sylvia, right?
Mm-hmm. He fought a bunch of people. He fought Chuck Liddell. He fought Fedor. And he moved to Russia.
Really?
Speaks Russian. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I overstated my case a little bit. There's Jeff Monson. Nobody else.
He's got a hammer and sickle tattoo.
Okay. All right. So there might be an exception.
He's a wild fellow.
No, but so you said, so in 1947, and this is like right in the aftermath of World War II, and the British Empire was basically crumbling, and they had been ruling the territory of Palestine under a mandate, and so they basically washed their hands of the situation. There had been issues for years already, and they kicked it over to the United Nations, and the United Nations was a brand new organization, or like a year old or something like that, and they had no authority to like create states out of nowhere. It was a recommendation. They go, we recommend this partition plan that would have given 56% of the land to the Jews for a Jewish state and 44% of the land to the Arabs to have an Arab state. And at the time, the Jews, the Zionist settlers there, they owned about 10% of the land. And so this recommendation was that they get 56% of the land. And so immediately the Zionist settlers accepted. They went, yes, great deal. We'll take 56% of this. And the Arabs were like, no, that's not a fair deal at all. And then pretty immediately after that, there's a great book by Sheldon Richmond called Coming to Palestine, if you're interested in the topic and you want to see it. But immediately after that, a bunch of essentially like Zionist militias started kicking Arabs off of the land. Like, hey, the UN said this part's ours. And like at first a civil war broke out. And in this process, hundreds of thousands. I mean, between 1947 and 1948, the total number is around 750,000 Arabs who were forced out or fled. And then in 1948, Israel declared independence. And then, as a response to that, outside Arab nations invaded, got involved in the fight. Israel won. And then after Israel won the war, they seized about 80% of the land. So they were offered 54% or recommended 54%. They won a war, and then they just took 80% of it. And then in 1967, so this is 1948, but at that point, at the end of the war, the portion that is the Palestinian territories today, that was the West Bank and East Jerusalem, that was controlled by Jordan, and Gaza was controlled by Egypt. And then in 1967, Israel launched a preemptive war, and they won again. And then they just took 100% of it. And then they just took control of the West Bank, all of Jerusalem, and Gaza. And they've had it ever since. Jeez. They won a war in 1967, and they've occupied these territories ever since. And the Palestinians in these areas they just have no rights. They have no natural rights. They're just nothing. Like they are the government of Israel. For most of the time, they were literally occupying it with the IDF, like not worse than martial law, because it's like a foreign military, like foreign occupation. And they've always maintained control of everything that goes in and out, what supplies, how much food, how much water, how much electricity, all of these things. And look, it's just, if you're going to talk about this situation, as so many people do, like so many people in like Ben Shapiro's camp, they talk about this conflict, talk about October 7th, and just leave all of that out. And if you do that, you're just not really having a conversation about what's going on here. You know what I mean? Like you can never really like grapple with the situation if you don't at least acknowledge that this is what's going on. And then they just get sucked into like the dumb George W. Bush, they hate us for our freedom and, all that. And you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. It's the same mentality of that. You're either against Hamas or you're, for Hamas or something like that, which is pretty stupid.
Isn't it fascinating? This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. The holidays can be really amongst therapists on is your or VPN. 3 extra months. That's fascinating that on 2 occasions, 9/11 and in October 7, there's an initial response from the world, like anger, outrage, horrific scenes. And then because of the attack and the response to the attack, then most young people now, like when I was in New York City 2 weeks ago for the UFC and there was the Free Palestine March, it's wild, dude. I mean, the fucking streets were filled with people. It looked very organized. And they attacked the UFC bus. And they slashed the tires of the bus while Robbie Lawler and Jamal Hill were on that bus.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently, there was a thing where they were blocking traffic, and the bus tried to get through before they got there. And they got angry at the bus, and so they attacked the bus and smashed windows and slashed tires.
Jeez. Yeah.
Yeah. They're so lucky that Jamal Hill and Robbie Lawler didn't get off that bus and just start putting people into orbit.
Dude, I don't know how many protesters it would take to beat up those two guys.
You have zero chance. Jamal?
It's a lot.
Dude, Jamal can crack. That's a big fella, too.
Yeah.
He's a big fella, and he can crack. People are running from him. He's going to crack 1 or 2 people, and everyone's going to run.
Yeah. Yes, probably.
100%.
Yes, my money is on the professional
someone's going to
too.
recognize Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
Someone's going to recognize him.
Yeah.
And they're going to realize, oh, my God, these are UFC fighters. And there's 2 of them. Oh, my God. And then you're going to realize, like, who else is on the bus? Let's get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. No, well, look, it's probably for the best for those protesters that it didn't go down that way. But, yeah, it's been pretty – look, the protests, and it's global. I mean, they've been all over the world and in huge numbers.
Now, let me ask you this.
Huge numbers. We already talked about that and who's kind of organizing that, because there's a lot of good people. Like I've said this before, a lot of good people who just, have sympathy in their hearts and want to go out and support and want to like make themselves known and help the whole movement of things. And then there's some people who are just like, they're organized. They're very organized, and they're doing it with some financial backing. But Dave Smith, saying a whole lot, giving some really good jabs to Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire team. I have to be honest, I have noticed that from the Daily Wire team as well, but it makes sense. I mean, Ben Shapiro is a Orthodox Jewish person. He has family in Israel, so I get it completely. And it's not the whole Daily Wire team. Candace Owens has been pretty much on Dave Smith's page. If we're going to be completely honest about the Daily Wire, Candace Owens has been going pretty hard. And I think Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro were actually at odds. And Ben Shapiro suggested that Candace Owens should quit. He's been pretty blind with rage since this whole thing happened. And I want to say understandably so. But at the same time, I won't, because he is a media personality, an online personality, and he is Mr. Facts Don't Care About Feelings. So I would like to see him more level-headed than he's been and embracing the whole just, bringing facts and just keeping it at that. Ben Shapiro, when he tries to have emotion, it just doesn't work. He's not that guy. He's not that guy. He's not the charisma guy. He's the facts guy. He's a guy who talks fast with facts, super intelligent, and you're just like, wow, can't argue with that. That's what he's good. When he goes towards emotion and stuff, you're like, oh, this guy doesn't know. Like it brings down his brand a whole lot, my opinion. But Dave Smith, even doing the disclaimer of being like, hey, I love America. I just want to make sure there's some people who hate Jewish people. I'm not a person who hates. Even as a Jewish person, he has to do that. And I know that feeling because you right away, when you have a take like this, I know as a black person, when I have a take on the black community that isn't all like, yeah, go get it, we're all oppressed, we're all kings. When I don't have that view, right away people are like, oh, you hate yourself. That's all it is. So I know he was trying to kind of mitigate that from happening, because that is the first thing that people are going to say. What kind of Jewish person is going to speak on behalf of Palestine and everything? But, Dave Smith is somebody who very libertarian, very about truth, justice, and definitely speaking everything that he feels, not holding back, and then also having a whole bunch of facts. So I'd expect no less from him. Would be good for Israel's side if he was on Israel's side, though, because he could come up with a whole lot of facts. But again, he can't ignore the whole picture, which I get where he's coming from, because something that he said in that whole thing, where he said, I grew up being exposed to the Israel side of things. That's exactly how I grew up as well. I always grew up hearing the Israeli side of it, the Jewish side of it. And I never heard the Palestinian side of it. Never. Because, I was alive before the internet, and I've been hearing about this since before you could go on Google and search things. So I really had that type of, I don't want to say indoctrination, because I've always been someone who will push aside ideas when they're coming from so many people in the same exact way. I've always been wary of people speaking in unison. It's always something that's thrown me off. So I can always just hear it and be like, oh, okay, is that what's going on? Oh, okay, I understand. So, yeah. The main thing that stands out to me is the percentages that he's talking about. That's something I didn't know. I don't know if you knew that. But the percentages of having 22%, the Israel side taking 100% after they won a war. You know what? I didn't know about the percentage, but I have heard from friends. Because I've had this conversation so many times. As much as people don't like the term, this didn't start on October 7th. This has been going on for a long time, and I have had friends who are Israeli who are like, yeah, we would have, they would want a fight, and we would fight, and we would take some land. And I don't know if that's wrong or not. In the case of war, I don't know if, can you just take land after you go to war with someone? I don't know. And I'm not even sure if it was completely just like a war, if it was just kind of what's going on now. Like, I guess you can say what's going on now is a war, but I don't know. They're already at a ceasefire. It seems like for years, for decades, it's always been one side attacks, the other side gets really mad, the other side attacks. I don't know. I see like Afghanistan was a war. that was going on for years. World War II was a war. It was going on for years. Like, I don't know. These always seem very short with the Israel-Palestine conflict. They always seem very condensed, quick things. And I guess every single time they were taking land. I could see that happening in war. I could definitely see that happening in war. But here's the thing. If it is wrong and it shouldn't happen, why does no one step in? No Arab countries step in. The UK doesn't step in. America doesn't step in. The UN doesn't step in. No one steps in. So it almost, by everybody staying silent, and by everybody I mean all the nations, all the superpowers who could have say, by everybody standing silent, it almost makes me feel like it's okay when it's war. It's okay to take that land, take a little bit more, take a little bit more. I don't know. I could be wrong. But again, kudos to Dave Smith for speaking on all this the way that he has, because, you know, not all outlets have been talking positively about Israel, but all the American ones have. Right down to the independent ones. We've only been really hearing one side, and the only time we've really heard the other side is through protests. And those protests don't look good to me. I do not like seeing the pro-Palestine protests. Not because I am anti-Palestine. It's because when I see those protests, they have the same branding as the BLM protests. A lot of masked up people, a lot of people destroying things. When they're talking about that thing with Robbie Lawler and Jamal Hill, those UFC fighters, somebody slashed their tires. Someone tried to break their windows. Just crazy stuff. I'm always seeing that. A lot of masked up people. Not always Muslim people. Nothing against white people, but it's just like the people that organize it don't even seem like they have a side in terms of Israel or Palestine. But they organize these big protests. It happens in big numbers. I don't know. I saw the exact same thing happen with BLM, and it just never sat right with me. So to see it now with the Palestinian protest is a little weird. But let me know what you think in the comments of what Dave Smith had to say about everything. You know, did you know any of that? You know, if you're a pro-Palestine person, you probably knew some of that. But if you've been somebody who's kind of in the middle, kind of just, you know, kind of like me, just, hey, what about the border? What about the drug epidemic that's going on? What about the cartels? What about China? Like, what about everything else that's happening in the nation? If you're like that, did you know about this? Did you know that they were taking land little bit by little bit and then they never gave it back? Do you think that they should give it back? I'm kind of on the side of maybe if you wanted to be nice, maybe if you really wanted peace, you'd be like, okay, we're going to give you back some of the land we took after you attacked us and we won the war. We're going to give you that little bit back. I think if you wanted to be nice, you would do that. And I think, I don't know if I would in war, just in war. But again, I'll say again, I'm not an expert in all this, so I don't know if you're even allowed to do that. It's really, everybody hates hearing this. Somebody even said in the comment section, they're like, oh, you're saying it's complex. Oh, and they were like a pro-Israel person. It's like, shut up. It is complex. It's not complex when you don't care. If you don't care about one side and you don't care about innocent people on that side, then it's not complex to you. It's just a one-sided thing. It's just like, this is it. Just like Dave Smith said, it really is that approach of good and evil, and this is the clear bad guy, this is the clear good guy. That's only done with 7-year-olds. That's a very immature concept because this thing is very complex, especially after hearing everything Dave just said, and then also knowing the plight of people who are in Israel, who live there, who aren't the people who came in and kicked people out of places. Like I have friends who live there. They didn't kick anybody out, you know? And I would have the same sympathy for them as I do with anybody here. Like you didn't kick any native people out of where you live, but they were there before. But you just moved in because the world kept going and moving and you were just like, okay, there's a house for sale. I'm going to live here now and this is where I live. And this is where I've always lived. This is where I'm from. I have many people who I know in Israel who have just that. They didn't kick anybody out, and their grandparents didn't kick anybody out. Their grandparents are from North America, and they decided to move over there because they felt a connection to Israel. And now all of a sudden it's like they're supposed to give up. Like if somebody came right now to where I'm at and they're like, yeah, I'm with the Cherokee tribe and this is where we're from, I'd be like, get out of here. I don't know. I don't know. It's a very complex thing. It's hard. It's a very hard thing. Again, kudos to Dave for actually speaking on this. As a Jewish man saying everything that he just said, he's going to receive a lot of flack, and I know he's strong enough to handle it, but still, I feel for him because I know with the takes that I'm going to have in the future, because I do plan on talking about the black community a little more because, I am a coach. I do teach habit formation and control and integrity and all sorts of things. So eventually I'm going to start getting into that more. And I know I'm going to receive the same type of thing. I've watched Candace Owens go through it. I've watched Officer Tatum go through it. I've watched Chad O. Jackson go through it. When you stand against your own, it's a tough wall. It's a tough wall to stand against. Anyways, guys, like the episode, subscribe, and I'm out.